Take all the seats, you will need them.
How great to see you. Thank you for being here. It's wonderful to be amongst fellow fans.
Thank you so much. Now, Jon, there is a big trend at the moment in comedy for nerdy and geeky comedians who sort of wear their fandom on their sleeves. But you were sort of in the vanguard of that, weren't you? You were always very open about your Doctor Who credentials.
Oh, yes, always, always. I remember when Dead Ringers started on Radio 4, and they wanted it to be, you know, a topical satire show. And I'd done a few phone calls and so on, and been slightly mischievous in that respect. And I said to Bill Dare, the producer, I said, I think we should do some phone calls with Tom Baker's Doctor Who. Because I think that would be just so wonderfully, mischievously disruptive, you know, you could... And Bill said, this is meant to be a topical satire show. And you're doing the Doctor Who from the 1970s up until 1981. I said, no, trust me, it will be very, very wonderfully mischievous indeed. And it's such... when you put on, you know, a fedora and, you know, that wonderful burgundy outfit, and I like that... I didn't even realise I was doing that. But you walk out to do a hidden camera show, for instance, and if you have the Tom Baker Doctor costume on, that's better than a suit of armour. You can get away with anything. So yes, it was a merry time, the start of Dead Ringers.
I love the way you inhabited the character of Tom Baker's Doctor as well. There's a wonderful phone call where somebody says to you, hey, look, mate, I haven't got time for this. And you said, no, you have got time, I'll find the time.
Yes, I shall make the time, just reverse the polarity and some channeling of some neutrons, or however it's done these days. And yes, you can just sprinkle in. That's the wonderful thing, a science fiction character in a phone call on a show such as Dead Ringers. When the juxtaposition of the Doctor against a cab office or a pizza delivery shop, and you have this wonderful clash of cultures and so on, and it does bring out the wonderful one-liners from the people you call. You get some wonderful gems. One of my favourites was, yes, hello, is that the bingo call? Have I called the bingo hall? And this wonderful lady says, yes, that's right, yes, this is the bingo hall. Really, is that the Cosmos bingo hall? Yes, love, yes. Whereabouts in the Cosmos? Eccles. Just so lovely to have those two things together like that.
Fantastic. And how did you first decide that Tom Baker was the character for you? Had you followed him when you were a child?
Oh yes, absolutely. I'd done a voiceover session with him, and you know, here was this that great velvety boom that you have, and those very expressive eyes and the tumbling thoughts just pouring out there, and he was just fascinating. And I thought, you know, to borrow that persona could be quite good for comedy, and it was great fun. I remember the time when I think there'd been a couple of series of Dead Ringers on Radio 4, and BBC Two came along and said, you know, could you do a version of the show for us? And we thought, right, okay, how do we televisualise those Tom Baker phone calls? What do we do with those? And we thought, well, perhaps we could simply line up some hidden cameras, some roving hidden cameras in luggage and this sort of thing, and then just head out into a normal shopping area and have the Doctor interacting with the real world, going into a betting shop and placing a bet on the Grand National of 1977, going into a hardware shop and telling them that their egg whisks and sink plungers are primary weapons of a Dalek, this sort of thing. And so that's exactly what we did, you know, going up escalators and saying it's the entrance to a time-space tunnel. All of these things, and we filmed about an hour's worth of stuff just one morning, not for transmission, just to see if the idea would work. And we got some lovely responses from the audience and the people who we'd just bumped into, and we thought, this is good, this will work, this will give some, this will form a nice part of the show. And we were all finished, ready to pack up, and there was a taxi rank about 50 yards away from us, and there was a lady there laden down with shopping bags, lots of shopping bags, and she was struggling to get into a taxi. And I said to Bill Dare, the producer, I said, now then, in a situation like this, what would the doctor do to a lady trying to get into a taxi with all of these bags and so on? He'd go and help her. So put the camera back on, and I remember strolling up to the taxi rank and then saying, "Ah, yes, I'm the doctor, may I assist you?" And this lady just sort of froze like that, and she slowly turned around, and of all people, and this was completely by chance, there was no planning, this just happened by the most incredible serendipity, she turned around, and of all people, it was Elizabeth Sladen. And it was incredible, and the look on her face as if to say, "Oh God." When you're presented with the Tom Baker's doctor in front of you, and of all people, we simply could not believe that had happened. But we did. We helped with the shopping, and we were very helpful. We never transmitted it because it was never for that purpose. And off she went, and that was the most astonishing thing.
I'm sure it'd make an incredible Easter egg on a future DVD. You very kindly sort of sent me up a back alley because I don't know if anybody saw on Facebook there was a link to your Random House interview you did with Penguin very recently.
Oh yes.
Where you very kindly answered all the questions I prepared for you for today. But one thing that did strike me was you said that you'd always known that you had the facility to do impressions. Did this come from play as a child? Were you acting out televisual icons and that sort of thing?
I think it did. It never struck me that it would be something to form a career in any sort of way. It was just fun. It tended to make people laugh. Yeah. I think a lot of the characters that I'd pick up on and watch as a child, I think were Doctor Who aliens. Yes, Sontarans. I am a Sontaran officer. My name is Lynx. Things like that. I loved all the Doctor Who monsters and Belial from Death to the Daleks. Yes, please. I mean you no harm. I will help you if I can. Doctor, machine creatures coming this way. Sweet little things like that. I love those more eclectic characters, and I just listen and repeat from the TV, and it was just as random as that, really.
And from that, you've built a career not just in science fiction entertainment, but in genuine science as well. I mean, you're currently working on a stargazing series with friend of the Society, Dr. Paula Bull.
Oh yes, that's right. Yes, I remember it was 10 years ago at the 50th anniversary of The Sky at Night, and they wanted to replay the first episode of The Sky at Night from 1957, but of course in those days programmes were never recorded, so we had to recreate it. So the producer, a lady called Jane Fletcher, who would say, "Right, Patrick, we've got this idea. If we get an impersonator to play you opposite the real you from 1957, would you be up for that, Patrick?" And he said, "No, absolutely not. No, that will be quite wrong. The Sky at Night is not Monty Python. No." But Jane Fletcher was, she was the only one who could talk Patrick round, and she said, "No, Patrick, let's just give this a try, no." She was sort of like a bossy Balamory type person. And he said, "Oh, very well, very well, very well." And so I came along to join Patrick Moore at Farthing's, his home in Selsey, and we just started to read a few passages, just read a few words back and forth together. And after a few moments he started to think, "Oh, right, I see. Yes, I see. And he sort of felt as if he'd been joined by the mischievous sibling that he never had. And he started to get quite into it, and then he started telling all sorts of anecdotes. He says, "You see that silver cross on the wall there under a piece of ribbon? What do you think that's for?" And we'd look at it, and it was under his BAFTA fellowship. It was under his fellowship of the Royal Astronomical Society, under his knighthood certificate. And we thought, well, this must be something very, very important. Is this, you were in the RAF, Patrick, you were a navigator in World War II in the RAF. Is this some sort of Royal Air Force version of the Victoria Cross? No, it came out of a Christmas cracker. And he'd get mischievous like that. So yes, it's comedy led into... I was always interested in astronomy anyway. And it's always lovely joining in with programs like that, because you have the very lucky chance to ask the experts what hopefully the rest of the audience might be thinking. And so that's a lovely thing. So Star Map, the thing I'm working on at the moment, is all about observing and amateur astronomy. What to see in the night sky, but the stuff you can observe from your own backyard. You know, you don't need a Curiosity rover on Mars or anything like that. So yeah, that's an interesting thing.
So it can be done on a budget.
Yeah, well, yes.
And the BBC always loved things on a budget, which I think is possibly why the full cast recording of The Pirate Planet stars Jon Culshaw as K9 and Tom Baker and everybody, yeah. And it's I don't know if anyone's heard it yet. It's beautiful, and James Goss has done a wonderful job of recreating Douglas Adams' writing style.
Yes, one of these days we should do a panel and really, go into that.
Yeah.
It was an epic one to do, but as you say, he really gets that Douglas Adams sense of mischief and also being epic at the same time, and just capturing the sense of how Douglas Adams is a philosopher, really, in the scale of his stories and the way they make you think. And also he can do that thing of sprinkling in a line from Girls Aloud. That's just what Douglas Adams would have done, just to play with things and subvert things in that way. And it's what you could imagine perhaps Matt Smith or David Tennant's Doctors just sprinkling into their dialogue very casually. So yeah, that was an epic one to read.
And you're in the middle of recording some of Terrance Dicks' novels at the moment as well.
Yes, those stories that I remember as a lad from growing up. I remember them so vividly. And the audiobooks that I've been working on recently, Death to the Daleks, with the aforementioned Belle and that wonderful Scottish character, Galloway.
And so if we have to lose a few people that we don't even know along the way, then that's just too bad.
I've known pub landlords like that. And Ian Marter, the wonderful Ian Marter, he did some wonderful Target novelizations. He really captured the grit of it. But I just love Terrance Dicks' writing, the way that he just crystallized the story and just guides you through it so beautifully. And later this month, I'm very much looking forward to recording Genesis of the Daleks. What a story that is. So that's going to be fantastic. The brilliant Nick Briggs providing the voice of the Daleks too, which is just brilliant. It gives you something to real play against, and to have the authentic Daleks in the audiobooks is just fantastic. And then in June, another of Terrance Dicks' great legendary titles in the fabric of Doctor Who. We've got the 5 Doctors coming up, so that'll be a wonderful thing too. I'm just researching some of the other Doctors just to get the tone as close as I can.
Do you find yourself reading Terrance Dicks novels as Terrance Dicks at all?
Sometimes, one of the things I always look forward to in a Doctor Who DVD, for example, is where you have in the DVD extras. Terrance Dicks is there, you see, and and of course, this gives you, the companion. It's a wonderful way to split up your story. You see, you go that way and I'll go this way. Green, the colour for monsters is green. This seems to be a thing.
Doesn't sound in the least like me.
I should start by apologising. How wonderful for you to join us, and may I say what an honour it is to read your Target novelisations.
Well, it's very nice to have someone so competent doing them, that's all I can say. Not that the others aren't. I mean, I've been getting an awful lot recently, they send me a copy. Richard Franklin, Katie Manning, and your good self. That's really nice that they're continuing in life.
But it's wonderful. It just, as you said once, in the 1970s, there was no catch-up TV, there was no DVDs or VHS. The only way you could get another fix of your favourite stories was through the Target novelisations, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was a big advantage for them, of course, because, yes, that was even before VHS. And they hardly ever, once in a blue moon, did they repeat a Doctor Who. So if you missed it, you missed it. You know, you were never, ever going to see it again. I mean, now absolutely everything is out on DVD twice. So, I mean, because they did them all once with just the show on, which is fair enough. But then they found that fans wanted things with interviews and discussions and interviews with actors or people like me or whatever, and I did a whole they said they did them all again. They did them all twice, and I did a whole lot of things on those.
It's wonderful to just have them all the more now. It's fantastic. We sort of can't get enough, really, can we?
No, that's right. And there is a slight theme to the two of you being here, because, of course, Terrance, you're a very skilled impressionist on paper. You've had to capture a lot of characters' voices. How do you go about that?
Well, I don't know. It's you see, the thing about, I always used to get a bit batty when people would say, well, you've only got to do the script, you know. I mean, the script tells you what people say and what they do. It doesn't tell you how they say it, or what the atmosphere is, or what the costumes are, or what the... I mean, tremendous amount of work done by every actor in the cast and all the behind-the-scenes people, and that goes to what comes on the screen. And you, as you say, you have to capture all that in a book. But on the other hand, some of the earlier ones, I think the special effects were rather better in my books than they were on the screen. I mean, in the one of the first autumn ones, and the publisher hadn't seen the show, so my editor, when he read it, you know, he read the book, and he said to me afterwards, when I was in the office, he said, I really like that scene where the tentacle breaks out and attacks the Doctor and he's struggling for his life. I wish I'd seen that. And I said, if you'd seen that, you'd have seen Jon Pertwee pulling faces and struggling unconvincingly with a flabby plastic testicle. Not testicle. Tentacle. Tentacle is the word. A testicle would probably have been better.
Yes. That was in the After Midnight Doctor Who.
And so often you could fill in those gaps, and you could make it sound better, perhaps, you know, than we could afford to do in those days, because the show was very, very low budget, you know, when it started. Though it went up. Barry Letts used to boast that he joined it as a cheap show and left it as an expensive one. But in those days you could, you know, because the BBC was still making money. I mean, Pertwee first went into colour, you know, and everybody was buying colour sets, and the BBC was rolling in it, so a bit of an overspend, you know. They were happy, more liberal days than later on.
I always love the sense of what came over, the wonderful way that you and Barry Letts worked together. It seemed you had this way of making a programme such as Doctor Who immensely complicated, so many variables, but you made it simple, you made it run, you made it work beautifully, in a way that not many can do.
I was very lucky. I mean, script editor is a peculiar position because you're not actually in the chain of command, you know, which goes from, it goes from producer to director, you know. And what the script editor's job is very much what you make of it, what sort of position you can get for yourself. I mean, I've known script editors who hung around after a conference and cleared up the teacups, you know, that kind of thing. But Barry and I hit it off immediately. He was my best friend for, I don't know, over 30 years, and I miss him greatly. And Barry always treated me as an equal and a co-producer. And he would say, you know, he never said, I'm going to do this. He'd say, we're doing this, you know, Terrance and I have decided. So that gave me a lot of clout, because people knew that if I said something, I was speaking for both of us. I was speaking for Barry, you know, so that made my job a lot easier. And the other thing is that we just kind of clicked together, you know, our minds were... They used to say we were a two-headed Beeblebox, you know, that we were like one person merged, and it was true in a way. We very seldom disagreed about anything.
I'm going to throw it open in just a second, but just very quickly, because something Terrance has said. I just want to ask, thinking of Terrance, you were saying the actors have to fill in all the blanks from the script. Do you, John, when you're recording the audiobooks, do you go back and re-watch the actors' performances first, or do you create it anew, as it were?
Yes, I do watch the DVDs in quite some detail, just to get it very familiar, just to get it at the front of your mind. So you know all the characters, you're aware of the interactions. You've got to have that sense of what's going on, and then you can deliver it with the maximum coherence and just have the tone of their voice fresh in your mind.
I remember watching Death to the Daleks the day before, and there was Galloway once again.
And that lovely way, one of the early lines that he says when the Doctor's described as, don't worry, I think he's quite friendly.
We hope.
Duncan Lamont had that wonderful voice. It's good to have all things like that fresh in your mind as much as you can. So Genesis of the Daleks and the Five Doctors are the ones that I'm watching to a great degree now, and there couldn't be better research ahead of an audiobook.
Fantastic. I think we'll throw it open to the audience. Does anyone have any questions for Terrance or John or both?
Yes, I've turned into David Dimbleby. Yes, the gentleman there.
Not you, the one behind.
Thank you, David. John, you recently, or some time ago, recorded a big Finnish story, Philip
yes.
Hinchcliffe produced
Yes.
story. I wondered if you could just tell us a little bit about actually working with Tom on that, and then just what your childhood self would think about you starring in a Philip Hinchcliffe produced Tom Baker story.
It would be, it's hardly believable, you know, if my former self, which is strictly forbidden against the first law of time, but it's just like reading your Target novelizations. It's the same feeling. I read these as a child, and to be having to be involved in it now is just, I feel so immensely lucky, and it's such a thrill to do that. And same with the Genesis chamber. And the wonderful thing about that, not only is it a wonderful story with big ambitions and lots of characters, the atmosphere whilst recording it was so enormously happy. And you know, Tom Baker, he's got his own seat in the green room.
And yes, the hand is always up like that, and the anecdotes are just tumbling out the whole time, really, like that. And yes, about 5 o'clock in the morning, I like to get up, I walk the dog, we have a great lurcher. And sometimes the cat follows us too. I'm not sure what species she thinks she is, but she follows us. And I like to quote Shakespeare at great volume in the early hours of the morning, just after dawn. Yeah, sometimes my fellow pedestrians look at me and they get very confused.
But it's just anecdotes like that all day. And it's a pleasure recording those stories. They're so brilliantly produced. And yes, it's just, I think Tom himself once said,
I don't deserve this kind of joy. I don't think I deserve it.
So yeah, they're terrific.
Thank you. I have a question for John, but just very quickly first. Terrance, as a child, I didn't read Enid Blyton, I didn't read Roald Dahl. I read Terrance Dicks novels, and they instilled in me a huge love of reading, of literature, going on from Terrance Dicks to Charles Dickens, and to this day I love reading.
That's what I said, let them start with Dicks and work their way up to Dickens.
But to this day, sir, I have a love of reading, and that's thanks to your books as a child. So from my heart, thank you.
Well said.
John, if I may, we live in interesting times politically now, and I'm thinking about the idea of spitting image. But it's often said that there are no personalities in politics now. So as an impressionist, I wonder, who do you see as the characters that should be impersonated now?
Oh my gosh, it's very true. You know, the time of David Cameron and Nick Clegg, you know, a little bit bland. a little bit, you know, like sort of like tumbleweed. Yeah. David Cameron, he was slightly Orton-like, wasn't he, David Cameron? You can imagine that face would fall off and there would be electrics under there. But very, yes, Boris Johnson was sort of like a quantitative easing. Yes, Nigel Farage, like some character that would have been very at home in the caves of Androzani.
And, you know, of course the Donald. You know, here's another one. You know, I think sometime we're going to see the Donald, and he's going to walk out, and we're going to see that the bottom half of Donald Trump is just like DWAS. But with a terracotta base and fake tan, things like that. It's going to be great. It's going to be fantastic. I'm going to make the Daleks. I'm going to make the Trump Daleks. You know, Trump Scarrow is going to be great. It's going to have a bingo hall and a casino. It's going to be beautiful. Let's take over the universe, folks.
Somebody once said to the Trump Davros, do you want one cyborg hand or two tiny ones?
You're talking about the face coming off, you know, just reminding me of something. Where there's one of them where the doctor is rescued from a tricky situation by a police car. And he's a bit worried, you know, that it's not all kosher and the car's going the wrong way and whatever. And he taps the policeman on the shoulder and he turns around and the doctor reaches up and pulls his face off and it's an Orton. And Barry Letts got a letter from the Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police saying, we are trying to teach the children of this country that the policeman is their friend. You are not helping.
Fantastic. Is there anything more from...
Terrance, Terrance, nice to see you, and I've enjoyed watching the adaptation of Oliver Twist that you produced back in 1980s. I was wondering, did you intend to adapt that closer to the book than some of the other adaptations you did?
I've not quite got this. No.
Yes, about the Oliver Twist adaptation from the 1980s.
Yeah,
Was it...
when Barry and I both left, we all left Doctor Who, and then I was away for about five years freelancing, mostly writing the Doctor Who books we've been talking about. And then Barry's script editor retired, who was an elderly, irascible Scotsman called Alistair, and Barry said, would I come and be script editor? So I was very fortunate because I had 5 years on Who with Barry, 5-year break, and then 5 years on the classic serial. And to my absolute astonishment, eventually Barry decided he wanted to leave the classic serial as well because he wanted to go back to directing, which was always his love. And to my absolute astonishment, they asked me to be the producer, which is something I'd always avoided because I felt that was serious grown-up work, you know. And I used to say, you know, if there was a sort of difficult meeting with the scene-shifting union or something, I used to say to Barry, well, good luck, and pick up a pile of scripts and come home. But strangely enough, I thoroughly enjoyed it. You know, I found I wanted to do it. I'm sorry, what was the actual question? I've lost track of that.
The gentleman was asking whether you deliberately adapted it more closely to the Dickens original than in previous movie adaptations.
Yeah, one of the things that Barry and I both felt was that, you know, people who adapt classics often change them. It's sort of as if they think they know better than Dickens, you know, and they don't. So we would keep as close as was possible and practical, is all I can say.
Thank you. Sorry.
Yes, we're at the back of the hall now.
Yes, we have a commentary on the microphone. So setting to the back of the arena now, it's found the right row, it's being passed along now. That's a beautiful relay there.
Is it on? Hello? It works. John, what's the hardest voice you've had to learn?
Hardest voice?
David Cameron, just because of just because of the blandness like that. Yes, the hardest voice. Simon Cowell was quite tricky. Once again, it's not very obvious what you've got to go on, but of course, sitting behind a panel this way, you get a few clues. He was quite tricky. Who else? Ricky Gervais. Okay, because little rictus noises. Okay. Oh. Usually, it's those characters that don't give you many clues as to what they're like. Or a character like Donald Trump is quite tricky to it's easy to overstate. So you've just got to pull it into the right sort of level. But I think probably the trickiest for sheer blandness and slipperiness and waxiness is probably David Cameron. So I'm glad he's out the way.
And of course, you actually stepped into Hollywood playing the Prime Minister.
The Blair incarnation
yes.
of the
Churchill, the Hollywood year.
Yes. Now that's a very interesting thing because if you have the voice of Tony Blair, which is quite deliberate, quite jerky, another Auton-like creature, and the interesting thing. If you take the voice of Tony Blair and then ramp it up ever so slightly, you arrive sort of here. Which I found very curious, really. And then go from the Daleks and make it sort of happy, and you land at Michael McIntyre, which is once again very sort of odd. But yes, of course, Tony Blair, the Prime Minister, he was sort of, open it, just call me Tony, in those days. So yes, that was quite an interesting thing.
Is there a gentleman there with a...
And here as well.
Has the microphone already this time? John, could we hear a bit of your Pertwee? And also, are there any other characters you've not done yet that you're looking into doing, or you could give us a glimpse at?
Yes, let's see. I love Jon Pertwee's voice. That wonderful crisp resonance. And I love those anecdotes. I spoke to a great friend of mine and asked if he could design the Whomobile. And he did a little sketch and held it out like that. He said, like that? I said, yes, exactly like that. Eyes can be seen, mouth can be seen. So you get real, true expression. That's why they were my favourite monsters. There's nothing more alarming than coming home and finding a Yeti sitting on your lewin-tooting back. Wonderful warmth and crisp resonance of Jon Pertwee's voice. It made him part of what made him such an astoundingly brilliant doctor. That paternal, protective, heroic quality. Yes, and all of that sort of caught up in that tone of great warmth. And that thing that he would do with that, yes, just before speaking. Yes, that's right. The more you do it, the more you sort of get into it. Yes, that's right. Like to be known as the master, don't you? My, but you've changed. Another regeneration? Yes, I could speak like that all day.
That's an interesting quote. It's almost as if he's establishing right of way before speaking, isn't it? Like, right, my turn.
I think because his delivery was so crisp and so, that wonderful precision about it, there was a little tick in just sort of getting ready before delivering the words. And it was kind of, yes, that's right. I'm just recalling it now. Yes, this would be the kind of delivery when the enemy had just been apprehended. And he was giving them a speech about why they were quite wrong. And how this is not the way, This is not the way. Go, you've already done more than enough harm. There was all that movement in there, and it just guided the words out. Yes.
And the gentleman was also asking, are there any voices you're preparing for or planning to do in the immediate future?
Interesting.
I'd quite like to do Christopher Eccleston. Okay, lots of planets have a north. So I think that'd be quite good, I thought he was, that sense of a battle-scarred doctor. That was quite, intriguing.
Who else is there?
Well, can we expect any of the 12th Doctor from either of you? Can we expect any of the 12th Doctor from either of you, from a written or from a vocal?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, I think yes. Peter Capaldi is one that I'm learning on at the moment. A great friend of mine, Lewis MacLeod, does a version of Peter Capaldi, and it's like, yeah, very much that sort of attack. He does it like that, like a scaled back Billy Connolly. But that was an exaggeration for the Newzoids puppet, so it needed to be bigger and exaggerated. So yes, we shall see. After the general election, there will be a crop of new characters as yet unknown. So that's certainly a time when you brush away all the characters that have been and gone, and wait for the new ones to come over the horizon.
And so, was there a gentleman at the front here?
It's just a question for Terrance, really. I recently read Barry Letts's autobiography, and you did the introduction to it, but it ends, unfortunately, because obviously Barry passed away, and it ends only halfway. So I just wondered, you're perhaps the best placed person. Did he actually get to do the second half?
Sorry.
No, after you.
The gentleman's inquiring about Barry Lett's autobiography, which unfortunately was abandoned by his sad passing, and he was just wondering if the scope is there. Did Barry finish enough material for you to finish his work?
Forgive me, he did the first book and moves to a second volume because he only tells how that it clearly ends, and there's to be a second volume in that time.
No, it is a great shame, but no, I don't think I would, because I knew quite a lot about his early life, from chats and things, but I don't think I would want to finish it somehow.
Are you not aware that he actually did in fact do a second volume because you wrote the introduction?
Yeah. I remember the thing about biographies is that when John Pertwee did his autobiography, was it Moon Boots and Innocence? Yeah. And I went to, there was a special dinner at the publisher's, W.H. Allen, at which John, of course, was a guest of honours. And afterwards, he started, made a speech talking about his life and work and everything. And by midnight, he got up to World War II, and his time in the Navy. He hadn't even reached Doctor Who. And they were running a pool about what time he would finish, and that kind of thing. But I think eventually when he paused, somebody just gave a round of applause and he had to sit down, But John bless him, he was on his favourite subjects, of course.
And do you happen to know if there is a second volume extant of Barry Lett's autobiography?
I don't, I really don't. Sorry.
Thank you very much.
Could I move to another famous TV programme, The Avengers, which I'm enjoying on True Entertainment at the moment, and watching Honor Blackman as Cathy Gale in 1962. I wonder, Terrance, if you've any memories of how you had to write for that.
Memories of that, because that was really my entree into television. I always say, so much of life is luck, but strokes of luck. This particular stroke of luck, I was still working as a copywriter in an advertising agency, and one of my friends there said, look, I'm getting married, and I've got a couple of rooms in Hampstead. Would you be interested in seeing them, taking them over? So I went to see it, and it was 2 rooms off a staircase, £5 a week, which I could just about afford in those days. And so I took them. And one day I saw this little bald-headed man painting the staircase. And I thought, well, he's obviously some minion who's been hired in, And later on, I asked another tenant, and they said, no, that's our landlord. That's Malcolm Hulk. And he owns the house, which he had bought to provide a living for his great aunt Winifred Boot, who lived, that is really true, who lived in the top flat, and ran the place for him, you see. And I said, what he does is he's a scriptwriter. His real job is. So I made it my business, obviously, to get to know him. And a bit like with Barry later on, Mac and I just hit it off. We had similar sort of minds, similar senses of humour. And one day he said to me, just casually, I've got a bit of a problem, Terrance. He said, they've asked me to do another Avengers, and I can't think of anything. And he said, have you got any ideas? And I said, Mac, have I got ideas? And we co-wrote an Avengers together called The Mauritius Penny. And the astonishing generosity of Mac, he insisted on 50-50 split of the money, co-credit on the screen. I mean, I'd have done it for nothing, just to get my name on the screen. And we wrote, I think we wrote 2 or 3 more after that at one time or another. And, they were great fun to do. Thing that's sort of attached to that is, some years ago I got invited to go to an Avengers convention. And afterwards somebody else said to me, what was it like? And I said, well, when I first went to the Avengers studio with Mac, I was a totally unknown writer with half a screen credit, and I was treated with the utmost indifference and contempt. And I said, recently I went to an Avengers convention, and nothing had changed. And at one point I was sort of sitting quietly ignored in a corner, and there happened to be one Doctor Who fan in the audience. And he came over and said, oh, you're Terrance Dicks. He said, if this was a Who convention, there'd be a big crowd round you, chatting and asking for autographs. And I said, no, but it isn't, and they're not. So I got invited to a second one, and I said, no thanks, once was enough. But it was my opening into television, which was great.
And you've brought Steve's umbrella along as a souvenir.
The umbrella is a disguised walking stick. If you carry a walking stick, you're admitting that you're an old codger who needs a walking stick. Carry an umbrella and you might just be an Englishman worried about the weather. And everybody knows the Englishmen carry umbrellas with them anyway.
That's life imitating art, isn't it? Because getting the job because you needed the flat is how Dr. Watson gets started in Sherlock Holmes. Am I right? Yeah. Are there any more audience questions for us? Anything?
Who was it?
Are you wearing your Fitbit?
A question from the fellow in the very splendid jacket.
This one's for you, John. I was just wondering, how did your great curator scene, how did that come about? And I must say it was very good, well done.
Oh, it's very kind of you, yes. I just happened to, by chance, to catch on YouTube Jake Dudman's impression of Matt Smith's Doctor. And I just thought, that's outstanding, that's superb. And it brought to mind the curator scene from the 50th anniversary. And just in my mind, echoing somewhere, that word, I really think you might, just sort of tumbled out, and I thought, we've got to do something with that. We've got to team up in some way about that. And quite by chance, just a few weeks later, Jake got in touch via Twitter to ask if I'd just give an interview for a film he was making in aid of the Save the Rhino charity, which I did, and that was where we had a chat. And should we recreate the curator scene? And we were both up for that, and we just thought, right, okay, well, I'll talk to the Dead Ringers director, Jonathan Gershfield, he can direct it, we'll rent a TARDIS, get a scenic artist to... It just sort of tumbled. It just sort of expanded into, a proper... We were going to do it on our phones in the beginning, but it turned into a directed, full-on piece. And then we thought we needed a little section at the end, just to give it a sort of an act 2. And Jake's David Tennant was fantastic, and I wanted an excuse to do my John Pertwee, and it felt that the 10th and the 3rd Doctors would have got on well. They'd have worked well together. They'd have been in the right sort of pace together. So that was really
That was really how it was. That's reminded me of a question, if I may just ask you a question, Terrance. One of my great Doctor Who curiosities has been, we never saw the Tom Baker Doctor and the Jon Pertwee Doctor work together in a sort of a three Doctors fashion. If you'd been writing that story, where would you have started that, do you think? How would they have worked together in an episode?
Well, we had a sort of near miss, of course, because of the five Doctors. When I just completed the first draft, and the script editor, who'd been quite like Eric Saywood, chasing me for it, and he rang up and said, how's it going? And I said, oh, good news, Eric, I've finished the first draft, I think it's pretty good. And there was a little silence, and he said, oh my God. And I said, that's not the reaction I hoped for. And he said, I don't know how to tell you this, Tom's not going to do it, you know. And though I say it myself, I'm a good man in a crisis. And I thought for a bit, and I thought, have you got anything we can use? And he said, well, there's this show called Shadder, got cancelled for a strike. And I said, have you got somewhere where I can have him picked up by the mysterious obelisk, and somewhere I can see him freed? And he said, yes, I think we can find something. And out of that came that scene in The Five Doctor with Tom and Romana on the punt in the river. I think it's one of the best things on the show. And not a word of it is by me. So that, but you know, I think I cannot now remember that first draft, but they certainly must have met and interacted in the TARDIS. So I tended to, you know, pair them off, as it were, and eventually, I mean, it worked out well. Oh, and I said to Eric at the end of that, when he said we've got something, I said, well, in that case, I'll trap the bugger in a time loop, and he can stay there for the whole of the story, which is more or less what he did. Otherwise, you had to call it the 4 and a bit Doctors or something, you know. But we just about got away with that. And we never, you know, as you say, it would have been a really very interesting combination. I mean, there was the, we were talking earlier about the Pertwee and Troughton combination, you know. And Pertwee, you were saying about how precise Jon Pertwee was, you know, that's very true. He would niggle about the script, you know, I mean, almost every show, the director would bring up and say, Terrance, could you come to the rehearsal room? John isn't happy about the script. And I would say, don't worry, John is never happy about the script. And I go through it with him, and, you know, sometimes it was a bit of gobbledygook, he couldn't get his tongue round, or something he didn't understand, because he wasn't, to be fair, the brightest, sharpest knife in the box. And I'd explain it slowly and carefully. Or sometimes, because he was an experienced actor, he'd come up with a good point. You know, he'd found a fault, and I'd sort it out for him. But once that was done, and he was happy, John would learn the script, you know, what they call letter perfect, line by line, always, every line delivered exactly the same way. And then he came to do these scenes with Patrick Troughton. Patrick Troughton delivers a rough approximation of the script. I mean, if the line is come in and sit down, he would say, my dear chap, how nice to see you. Have a chair, you know. And this used to, you know, it always made sense in the context, and it worked, but used to worry John dreadfully. And they had a row about it in the studio, and Pat Troughton said, look, don't worry about what I'm going to say, worry about what you're going to say. And John said, until I hear what you say, I don't know what I'm going to say. But they sorted it out eventually. But Tom and Pertwee would have been very interesting, you're quite right, they really would.
Perhaps some similarities to the second and third, how they interacted with a bit of initial, you know, like that, a bit of friction, but then I think they would have been they would have done wonders. Maybe we should write that scene.
Yes, definitely.
Yes, leave that with us.
Yes, what a very splendid idea.
You just want that to happen. Don't clap him, he just wants to charge 2 fees for the dog. I know there's a gentleman with another question, and a lady with another question. Unfortunately, despite the fact we've got 2 Time Lords and the best writer there was for Doctor Who, time has defeated us. But there will be another additional photo session for Terrance Dicks, and John, will you be on that as well?
Yes, indeed.
At 4 o'clock this afternoon, so if you do have questions for them, you can sneak in there on that. In the meantime, will you please join me in thanking the legendary Terrance Dicks and the multi-talented Donald Trump, Michael McIntyre, Dan Frost, John Pertwee, Tom Baker, and above all, Mr. Jon Culshaw. Thank you.